Hi, welcome back here to my London Sport living room. I'm hoping you like it. I've fluffed my cushions up just for you. This is a big session. This is a huge session and we've got a really good panel. It's all about social influence and how we're using social media to help people who are a little bit less active take some action. A fantastic panel, like I said. It's going to be led by Chris Northfield. He's the head of digital behaviour change here at London Sport, and he's going to be speaking to Dr. Sherry Pagotto from the University of Connecticut, Poppy McLeod from Versus Arthritis, Bex Townley from Later Life Training, Stuart Fenton from Fenton Digital, and Ollie Holt from CIM-SPA. Now, this is a big deal. We know during lockdown, this whole pandemic and everything else, social media was a really massive tool. But are we using it the right way? Are we using it to its maximum potential to really try and help those who are a little bit less active than what they should be? So let's get into this. I'm going to hand over to about to call you Dr. Chris, about to hand you over to Chris Northfield, who'll be speaking to that panel. Don't forget to engage in the chat function. Don't forget to make sure you put your questions in there, your comments, your thoughts, and use the hashtag #ActiveLondon. This is a social media chat after all. I'd like to see you using a bit of social media. So, Chris, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone here to the session today. We're going to be sharing some really practical and inspiring examples from a great set of speakers, and we've got a Q&A at the end of the session, so please do put your questions into the Slido on the side. Now, one of the effects of COVID-19 has been that people are connecting online more than ever. In fact, over the last year, social media engagement has increased by 61% compared to normal rates. So we're going to explore in this session how organisations are using social media to reach and engage people in health interventions. And to start, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sherry Pagotto from the University of Connecticut to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities of social media.
Thank you. Well, so I'll wait for my slides to pull up. Okay, there they are. Great. So I'll have you go to the next slide. Okay, so thank you for the great introduction. And so I'm a professor at the University of Connecticut, like Chris said, and I actually run a research center on social media and health. And so I'm excited to tell you a little bit about some of the research that we're doing. And also I'll start off kind of context setting in terms of what we kind of know about how people are using social media for health. So I'll go to the next slide. Great. So the pandemic has already come up in this conversation. And I think if there's anything the pandemic has taught us, it's that social media platforms are powerful engines for information dissemination, for better or worse. So we have observed what we call an infodemic, which is an epidemic of health misinformation happening before our eyes in the last 18 months. However, as exercise professionals, we've known for a really long time about misinformation on social media. And I'll have you click to the next, click one more time. There we go. So I found this on Instagram the other day. We've seen sentiments like this on social media and the internet since the beginning of social media and the internet. All kinds of misinformation about exercise. In fact, weight loss and exercise, I think, before the pandemic were the two areas where the most misinformation was floating around the internet. And before we had the internet, it was magazines. So all kinds of crazy ideas about exercise, how to get started on exercise, what you can get out of exercise, floating around the internet and affecting people's ideas about starting an exercise regimen. So, but just as misinformation can spread, so can science-based information. And so I hope one thing that you get out of this today, and one challenge I put before you, is to think about ways that we can all use social media to educate the public about the amazing benefits of exercise, what it takes to achieve a physically active lifestyle, and how to get started on an exercise program. So I'll have you go to the next slide. So to further understand how people are using social media to talk about health and share health information, we surveyed over 2,500 Facebook users and ask them about how much they're seeing content about health, how much they're sharing content about health. And here's what we found. Almost everybody said yes, they have seen health information on Facebook, whether it was just an article or a friend posting about their health condition or health behavior. Almost everyone has seen this sort of content. I'll have you click to the next. And over 2/3 have actually posted about health, whether it's an article about health, about their own health behaviors, maybe even saying, hey, I ran a 5K, or about their health condition in the past. So the next thing we wanted to look at, and I'll have you click one more time, is predictors of this sort of behavior. So what are the characteristics of people who are most likely to be posting about health information? Go ahead and click to the next slide. There we go. So here are some characteristics associated with posting more about health. Actually, male gender, that one surprised me because I figured it would be females maybe posting more about health, but it was males. Younger age, more educated folks, and those who have a chronic disease are more likely to be posting about health. And I guess that's not too surprising. I'll have you go to the next slide. And on this next slide, what I have is a continuum of how people engage on social media around health. And it goes all the way from very passive forms of engagement, like seeing your friends post about health or you posting about health, all the way to very active forms of engagement. So we see patients initiating online health communities. So maybe a Facebook group about diabetes or a Facebook group for runners, all the way to really active forms like having a blog, writing articles and that sort of thing, content creators. And so you'll see this full range of social media activities that patients are doing to kind of connect around their health, get information around their health, share their health experiences. And it's happening really on all platforms, not just Facebook, but also Twitter, lots of health hashtags, Instagram, obviously. There's a whole kind of Fitspiration community on there. And we're seeing it on TikTok and pretty much all the platforms. You can go to the next slide. When I first got on Twitter about 10 years ago, I noticed a lot of people were chatting about their weight loss journey, and weight management is an area of my research. So I thought this was super interesting. I had no idea that people were using Twitter for this purpose. And Twitter's so public, and it seems like a weight loss attempt can be kind of a private and personal thing. So I just thought it was interesting that people were out there tweeting publicly, about their weigh-ins, their workouts. They were connecting with other people, even people telling stories of their binge eating. And so I just was very fascinated by this. So I decided to survey folks who were doing this to find out what they're getting out of it. And we surveyed 100 people who said they tweet about their weight loss journey. And we discovered that they actually get a lot out of doing this. They said, we love the instantaneous support. So they love waking up in the morning, say, I got my 3-mile walk in, and then getting lots of replies of people saying, that's awesome. They love the resources and ideas they were getting from the people they found on Twitter, the motivation and inspiration, and that feeling of connectedness that comes with finding other people who are on your journey, sharing similar goals and frustrations. And then we asked them to rate the weight loss social support that they get from their Twitter friends, as well as the support that they get from their in-person friends and their family members. And a really interesting finding of the study was that people said that they actually found their Twitter follows more supportive when it came to their weight loss than even their family and friends. And they also said that they found their Twitter follows to be less of a source of shame and stigma than their family and friends. And that really surprised me, because sometimes you think of social media as lots of shame and stigma and that sort of thing. But people were able to sort of curate their following and their audience to get rid of all of that and just have the support and family connectedness that they were looking for. So this really impressed upon me that people are looking for their tribe on social media. And in my clinical work, I found that patients often who are trying to lose weight don't have that social support in real life. And so there's this huge opportunity to create community around whether it's exercise or weight loss on social media for people who just don't have it in their real life. Go to the next slide, please. So this got me wondering, as a clinical psychologist and an interventionist, is can we use online communities or create online communities to actually deliver health promotion interventions? So can we get out of the clinic and into a Facebook group, for example, and actually do the sort of counseling that we do in these groups? Go to the next slide. So we recently completed a randomized trial where what we did is we randomized people who want to lose weight and who their BMI was in the obese range to 2 weight loss programs. One was kind of the old school program where people came in once a week and met in groups, and we did counseling. We had either a dietitian or a behavioral health coach leading the groups. And then in the other condition, they got the same exact thing, except for the whole thing was on in a social media group. So in this study, we actually used Twitter, and we created private groups on Twitter. And the program lasted for a year. And our hypothesis was not that one group would be better than the other. We actually wanted to prove that they would be equivalent so that we could do as good of work online that we could do in person. That's what we wanted to see if we could accomplish. And we are also looking at outcomes like cost and retention to see if maybe it's even cheaper to do online. So I'll go to the next slide to show you some of our outcomes. Basically, what we found was actually the traditional in-person condition at 6 months did have an edge in terms of weight loss, but that edge was actually dissolved by 12 months, and that the groups were really comparable at 12 months. About a third of people in our online group at 12 months had lost clinically significant weight compared to 40% of our traditional condition, and that was the clinic-based condition. That is a little bit of a difference, but it actually was not statistically significant. So we did find that we can get similar outcomes doing this work online. And now in our lab, what we're doing is looking at ways to optimize it to create an even richer, more connected experience in these online groups. So we're excited about some of the data that we're seeing. I'll have you go to the next slide. And in the next slide, you can see that you can go ahead and click a couple more times. And I have a bunch of studies here, and click one more time. Yep. There's oh, you went a little bit too far. I'll have you back up one more time. But I just wanted to show you some other studies by other groups that are doing the same kind of work on Facebook and other social media platforms with physical activity interventions, weight loss interventions. And we're seeing a lot of evidence for these approaches. And so it's very exciting because this gives us that opportunity to get the good health information out there to people who are looking for it. And maybe as we get better and better at this, we can sort of neutralize that misinformation environment that we know exists around exercise and weight management. And so I'll have you go to my next slide. Around some considerations that I wanted to sort of leave you with. If you're thinking about using this approach, creating an online community for your audience, here's a few things to consider. First, you want to build an engaging evidence-based content library is what I call it. So kind of what your feed is going to be. And I would create it in advance and really make sure that it's engaging, include icebreakers and things like that. Conversation starters, and really create a safe space for people to share and connect with each other. Part of making people feel safe is taking privacy very seriously. And so we hear privacy coming up a lot when we talk about social media. And when you're thinking about online communities, nothing could be more important. And so ways to deal with privacy would be educate your members about privacy settings so that they understand what privacy means as it pertains to your community and the limits to privacy. Obviously, if you're using a social media platform, the platform owns the content and what's being shared. So there are limits to privacy. The other responsibility, if you're moderating an online community, is to be really on high alert of privacy breaches. So that includes monitoring who is joining, how members are behaving towards each other, and that sort of thing. And, if it's time for somebody to go because they seem like a threat to privacy or safety, you might need to be booting some people out. My experience with online communities, though, is that those sort of difficult situations are more on the rare side, and that people usually do kind of really respect each other and for the most part, get a lot out of it. But important to kind of keep an eye on privacy. We want people to feel safe and that they can share their experiences, without feeling like it's going to get out or, they'll be shamed. So going to my final slide, I just want to say, if you'd like to learn more about our work, feel free to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're doing lots of research on how to create online communities for health behavior change and how to make those communities vibrant and engaging, and also a place where people can really learn how to effectively change behavior. So I'll close on that note and happy to answer any questions that come up at the point we're ready to discuss.
Brilliant. Thank you so much there, Dr. Pagotto. Really interesting, I think, to see the kind of emerging evidence base that's being developed within academia. And I think as often is the case, alongside that, there are some pragmatic examples of actually organizations jumping ahead and starting to use these kind of the potential of social media. That's what we want to do now, is run through some good examples of how social media can be used to reach specific target audiences, but also to support and deliver health interventions directly to someone through social media. So I've taken the liberty of taking the first example here to look at how London Sport have been supporting partners to reach target audiences over the last year. And if we go to the next slide. Going back to the start of the first national lockdown last year, it quickly became apparent that the lockdown restrictions were disproportionately affecting people from lower socioeconomic groups and ethnically diverse communities. And data from Sport England showed that their activity levels were being significantly impacted compared to other groups. So we worked with Sport England to run a targeted social media campaign to try and reach those audiences online and prompt them to take up opportunities to be active. So the first thing we did was identify some suitable activity opportunities. So we found the Couch to 5K app, which is a downloadable kind of walking to running program that goes over 9 weeks, as a really suitable offer at that particular time. Alongside that, from talking to the audiences, we also worked with our parks to develop a brand new at-home fitness offer called Couch to Fitness, which again was for beginners, a 9-week program that gradually built up. So once we had those two offers, what we wanted to do was go out and use social media to directly reach those audiences and make it really easy for them to take up the opportunity. So if you go to the next slide. What we did was we used postcode mapping and to try and identify areas of London where there were higher concentrations of those communities, so either ethnically diverse communities and lower socioeconomic groups. And what we were able to do was actually find really specific locations and postcodes where we knew that the majority or a huge proportion of that population were in that audience. Therefore, what we're able to do, if you go to the next slide, is then create Facebook ads and run them in just those postcode areas. So using the targeting ability within Facebook. So we created content that was designed to resonate with a less active audience and with the audiences that we were looking to do. And we were able to run those in areas where we knew there was a high proportion of people from those groups. So we ran Couch to Fitness and Couch to 5K ads. If you go to the next slide, we could see that. So we ran 2 campaigns, both of them spending around £34,000 on ad spend. In total, we reached over 1.6 million Londoners with our adverts, and over 100,000 of them took an action. They went to the website or they clicked through to download. Now, we had slightly different levels of tracking. With Couch to 5K, we couldn't track end users to see where they lived, what they ended up doing, because essentially the tracking stopped at the App Store. But with Couch to Fitness, we were able to do a really good tracking to see actually were we able to reach the audiences that we tried to. Interestingly, just a side point there, the costs that we were able to track in terms of the cost to acquire a new user, you've got that sort of £6 or £8 there. We subsequently scaled this up and ran it nationally, and we were able to get the cost of acquisition for Couch to Fitness down to around £3 or £4. We found that to be about 15 times cheaper than doing traditional methods. So posters, leaflets, outreach often costs an awful lot more to actually reach these audiences. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that with Couch to Fitness, where we could track the outcomes, we saw that 46% of people who signed up and used Couch to Fitness were from ethnically diverse groups. And that was significantly higher than you would expect from the normal population breakdown. And again, also, so 48% were from inactive audiences and 44% from moderately active groups. So we really were able to use Facebook to reach the audiences we wanted and support them to take up an activity opportunity. And if you go to the last slide, we've been working on Facebook ads as a kind of a way to recruit people into offers. I would go as far as to say that for a lot of audiences and a lot of physical activity offers, Facebook ads offer probably the best return on your investment to reach that audience and prompt them to take part. What we'll do now is go on to our next speaker. We've talked about reaching communities. Now I want to talk about how do we actually support people using the tools of social media. And I'm going to pass on to Bex Townley, who's from Later Life, and is going to talk about the program that they've been running since the start of the pandemic.
Thank you, folks. I've got 5 minutes, a whistle-stop tour of how we at Later Life Training reached out to health professionals, to signpost patients, to exercise professionals, to signpost participants who were no longer able to attend their face-to-face groups, etc. So it's a whistle-stop tour of Make Movement Your Mission, which was, I think it's safe to say, a very organic process, given that on the day of lockdown, we, or 2 days prior to that, we decided that we would take 3 movement snacks per day to a Facebook group for 30 days. The catalyst really for that was an active calendar that we had produced in the December prior to that. So a paper resource to promote and disseminate accurate messaging around the CMO guidelines for physical activity for older people. So sit less, move more message, move more frequently. I'm going to say the word, this is not an exercise program. This is not an exercise intervention. This is a movement initiative. And we know from surveys and from plenty of research that physical activity guidelines are not disseminated well, are not understood, are not heard, and are not really implemented very successfully. So it was an experiment. It was something that we decided we would try. We had a captured audience, and it was our opportunity to make that a captive audience. Later Life Training already had proactive, modest figures on social media followings, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And the most significant, I think, shift for us was that as a training provider, we ordinarily reach out to health professionals, to academics, to exercise professionals. This was the first time we were reaching out to older people living with long-term conditions, people that could benefit the most from the least input, i.e. from the move more message. So we created the private Facebook group on the day that the lockdown was announced. We put out a video, a very clear video, or a live video of me explaining what we intended to do, so that those listening were very clear what it was and who was it for. Our vision was absolutely explicit. These were movement snacks, 10, 15-minute movement snacks. This is 3 times per day. Because of our existing social media followings, they really did the work for us in sharing and reaching out to people to get them to hear about what we were up to. So as a credible training provider and a trusted source, we already had a big foot up into reaching people that would believe us and kind of hear what we had to say. The Facebook analytics, of course, tell us about ages and locations. We can see how many people are viewing these movement snacks. All of that progressed from day one. We had 1,000 plus followers on the Facebook group at the point that I broadcast the very first movement snack. And those members continue to grow. We're standing at 4,000 today. I say today, you might have noticed that we're sufficiently forward than 30 days. 2 weeks into this mission, it became very, very clear that we had opened a significant door. And the impact that we were having just in that short time was such that it would have been almost irresponsible to close that door after 30 days. We're 18 months into the mission now, and learning differently about how people are approaching movement snacks outside of lockdown, of course. We reached 22 countries. This wasn't just a UK thing. So 22 countries were engaged across those initial kind of lockdown period. And in order to capture what we were achieving and the comments that we were getting, the interactions that were being forged, the communities that were being forged, we have available on our website two impact reports. All the details and the figures and the numbers you can find there from our website. So we have a 3-month and a 6-month impact report that you can see from our website. In addition, and over and above the movement snacks, it became apparent that the social interactions, just the mental well-being that people were articulating, the comments that were coming through. Sherry mentioned there about privacy and creating a safe space. And this was absolutely crucial for us. This group has been moderated very stringently and strictly. And yes, Sherry, we have had to say goodbye to a few people who were not in it for the reasons as per intended. What we have gathered a huge range of comments and positive experience from these movement snacks, and also from health professionals who have signposted their patients, participants to us. So the social events were significant. Those took place around about Christmas time, around about Easter time. We had a 1-year anniversary tea towel that we put out. So these things all part of that group cohesion, that belonging. These things and the calendar and the T-shirt all offered ways of people that could support, also financially in contributions, because all this is completely free and not funded. So it really was an organic process to engage people, be directed by what they wanted from the group, but remaining true to the vision of physical activity, movement, not exercise, adding additional movement minutes to people's days over and above anything else that they were planning to do. So the social media just provided, those channels, that Facebook group just provided us with a platform to impart and disseminate the messages coming from us at LLT, informed by research, best practice and evidence. I just wanted to leave you with the comments keep on coming, and we had one yesterday as a result of me informing the group that I was going to chat here today for 5 minutes. So I asked them what they thought about social media and how it had impacted on them. So if I may just read this, please. When we first came home after 12 months from a hospital stay, this is a mother referring to her adult son, we struggled to get any further help for him. I read things on Google and we did the best we could to help him walk, talk, do everyday things and tasks for himself. Then along you came. It was like a miracle, and through your powers of communication, expertise and personality, we were no longer felt we were struggling alone. I learned more from you in that first month than in the previous 12 months and of internet searching. The way you provide information has not only enhanced our lives physically, but mentally, spiritually and socially. We feel we have a family out there. We are unrecognisable from the 18 months since we last met you. Thank you so much for the three of you and those also working in the background for changing our lives. That is just one of so many comments, some of which you can view via the reports I've mentioned. I think my final parting shot here is social media is indeed a platform. The inspiration, the messages, the energy, the accuracy comes from the people reaching out and communicating reliably and consistently to our audiences. That's me done.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Bex. Genuinely one of my favourite kind of ever physical activity interventions, and something that I've referred to in nearly every meeting since the start of the pandemic as a way to engage an audience online. I'm going to hand over now to Poppy McLeod from Versus Arthritis, who's going to talk about their work around supporting adults with health conditions.
Thanks, Chris. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, my name is Poppy McLeod, and I'm the physical activity digital producer at Versus Arthritis. I think I've got a few slides, hopefully. So yeah, at the moment we're in the second year of the Let's Move project, which is funded by Sport England. We've had over 50,000 sign-ups to our content so far, which has been brilliant. The aim of the project is to help people with arthritis to get active safely and in a way that works for them. So we've been busy creating a variety of digital content, from movement sessions like our flagship Let's Move with Leon programme, to activity trackers, myth-busting articles, top tips from healthcare professionals, and personal stories from people living with arthritis. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit today about our Facebook group. So it's called Let's Move Versus Arthritis. And we created this and launched it back in November 2020. And I guess one of the primary aims of the group was really to have a platform where we could share all of this physical activity content that we've been making. But the group also provides a unique opportunity for members to be able to share their own posts and stories. And as we've already touched on, to motivate each other and to give each other advice as well. And then we've also seen that the group has, well, I'll come on to this a bit later, but the nudge effect is something I wanted to talk about as well, the power of the Facebook group to encourage someone to maybe change their behaviour that day if they weren't necessarily going to get active, but then they see something that inspires them to make that move or to do something. Next slide, please. So yeah, since launch, we've seen a variety of talking points in the group, and these are some of the most popular. So taking the first steps to becoming active. A lot of people in our Facebook group, that's kind of the stage that they've been at when they join the group, and they really want that advice of how do they get started and how do they overcome some of maybe the fears that they have around pain and fatigue. Lots of chat about motivation, weight loss, managing pain and fatigue, keeping moving whilst waiting for surgery. I mean, that's only becoming more and more popular at the moment, that as a talking point, and also the recovery after surgery as well. People talk about the improvements in daily life after they've got active. They ask advice from each other and share their stories and progress, particularly with the Let's Move with Leon programme, which I mentioned, as many people have been completing that this past year. So we've had brilliant uptake of the group. We've currently got 7,000 members. And we did, again, like others have mentioned, we saw it to be a particularly powerful tool during lockdown, enabling members to meet other people with similar conditions and have that virtual connection, but also the kind of motivation and ideas that the group could bring when those face-to-face connections weren't possible. And we've also seen brilliant engagement in the group. So we've had over 1,600 approved posts on the topic of physical activity, and way more posts submitted on all sorts of other topics, but we do try to keep it streamlined on the topic of physical activity. And then we've also had over 92,000 reactions to posts within the group, which is great, as it means people are not only passively reading through what's going on in the group, but they're also actively participating and commenting and hopefully going on to do some exercise afterwards as well. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple of examples of the kind of posts that are submitted to the group on a daily basis. So you can see one here on the left from Michaela, who with a combination of exercise and changes in her diet has noticed a dramatic improvement in her life overall, which is brilliant. And you can see just the number of people who are interacting with that post and, you know, kind of being spurred on by her message, which is brilliant. And then we've also got a post here from Chris, who had completed Let's Move with Leon and was noticing improvements in his posture, which has enabled him now to get back to doing some of the sports that he loved to do previously. Next slide, please. So we design all of our digital content with behaviour change theory in mind. So when members join the group, we really encourage them to have a think about their Let's Move wish, which you can see on the top left here. So basically, what is their pledge to physical activity? How do they want to get active? When will they do it? Who will they do it with? And we also encourage people to think about what they might do on a difficult day so that they have that backup plan in place, because we know obviously our audience are living with a lot of pain and fatigue, and they can feel disappointed if one day they don't feel up to doing the normal physical activity that they'd like to do. So it's really empowering to kind of have that backup plan in place. Even if it doesn't relate to physical activity, it could be just that you're going to treat yourself in a different way rather than doing exercise, or you're just going to relax. But just having a think about that can be really important. And also, how you'll reward yourself for keeping on track with your physical activity. So we've found monthly challenges to be a really powerful way of bringing the group together and focusing them on a shared goal. So you can see some examples here of the challenges that we've set so far. So we've encouraged people to buddy up, whether that's virtually or with someone in their household, for example, who's going to share that commitment to keeping moving every day. And then we also had a challenge from Leon in August, and he set a daily walking challenge, which was really popular as well. And we've also found that Facebook premieres, which we do on our main channels, of like our latest movement content, they're again really nice shared moments for people in the Facebook group to tune into, so they can all have a go at that movement video together, and then add comments and kind of compare notes afterwards, which is really nice. Next slide, please. And we obviously encourage our members to share as much content as possible, particularly photos and videos. So here's just a snapshot of some of the actual snapshots that we received from our April challenge, when we asked people to take a picture of how they'd been getting active. And again, that can have a really motivating effect if people share those and other people see them.
Thanks so much, Poppy.
Sorry, I've almost finished.
Any other last thoughts to share on this?
Sorry, one final slide, just on the power of nudging, which I touched on before, but just basically we've seen that the Facebook group can be a great reminder to people to do some physical activity that day. So they tend to get a notification, basically if someone's posted in the group, and then we see posts on a daily basis and comments of people saying, oh, I wasn't going to do anything today, or I didn't feel I could manage to do any exercise, but actually you've inspired me to do it. So that's brilliant to see. And then final slide, please. So we're going to continue to be sharing lots of content over the coming months. So it'd be brilliant if you could spread the word. We have a brand new stretching series coming in mid-October, so that's something to look forward to. I'll pass you back to Chris.
Amazing, thank you so much. And you might have noticed the examples we've used so far have been on Facebook, predominantly looking at kind of older audiences. A question we get asked a lot is, how do you engage younger people on social media? And I'm going to pass to Stuart from Fenton to talk about that.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Introduce myself. My name's Stuart Fenton. I specialise in creating digital marketing campaigns across the sport industry. I've worked with London Sport quite a few times now. And one of the last campaigns that we worked together on was one at targeting younger people and trying to get them active and pick up a new sport. We didn't really want to do it on a traditional sport. It was more urban sport. So it's things like parkour, skateboarding, street cricket, things that they perhaps wouldn't have tried before and might have been quite exciting for them. So if you go to the next slide, please. We'll show you a few things that we considered before we start to do any kind of plans. And I think this is key for anyone who's trying to target this audience. The first is, well, what channels you want to use? What channels are this audience going to be on? Secondly, what are the key benefits to them of your channel or your event or anything that you're trying to promote or engage with them on? Third, what could be stopping them from engaging with you? And finally, it's your content demands and what can you actually create? What access to content and assets do you have? Next slide, please. So I show you then a few of the examples of how we did this across the Urban Sport project. The first one is we decided to only use Instagram. We knew that the bulk of our audience that we really wanted to target was very active on Instagram. It was the one where we could really get to them. And we knew we could also create quite a lot of quality content. This was a period where we were about to go into another lockdown, and without actually being able to get into different types of events and interviewing people, some of the content for perhaps like that would be appropriate on TikTok may not have worked as well, but we knew we could deliver some really high quality stuff for Instagram. The point of our channel was to then almost sign people to take up a new sport or point them in where they could actually get that. So we had the benefit of if they'd come and follow us, we could show the opportunities that were available to them and really give them value. So we weren't just actually an event ourselves. We almost offered them a service of how they could pick up new things in London. One that was really key to us is that barrier that was potentially stopping them from engaging with us or actually picking up a new sport. And that was particularly with these kind of sports, things like skateboarding, parkour. They're some of the most popular content that you'll see on any social channel. And there's almost that kind of pressure to be an overnight success. So we really wanted to focus on content, that would have people say, look, no one starts pro. You're not going to be professional on day one, and that's okay. So we really want to showcase the kind of easier side to it or how you would get into it. And lastly, what kind of content would be available to you? As I say, we were just 2 weeks before we were getting all our content plans in place. We then went into another lockdown, which massively restricted us. So we had to get a bit creative what we put out instead. Next slide, please. So these are the kind of things that we did. And again, it was really to try and offer value to them and things that would actually interest these people. So we did things about piggybacking off the excitement of the Olympics. We then signposted saying some of the best skate parks in London and where they could actually be going to, or to give it a try once lockdown was over. Even basic things like during lockdown, when you weren't really be able to go out as much, how you would start getting or preparing yourself to take part in things like parkour, getting your fitness up or your strength up, and then even showing you where actually free outdoor sessions would be as well. If I show you this next slide, it has a video, which is a very basic one, but I've got two reasons why I would want to show it you. If we play it first of all, this was filmed by one of the events we were working with at the time, and it was basically the event instructor following someone who was new to parkour and showing the kind of setup where they were, what's really involved with it. What was actually quite nice about this is really just to highlight you don't actually need a big production team to try and get this content that's available to them. But also, if we move on to the next slide, it's having an opportunity to actually develop your own influencers. I think when trying to target anyone from this type of audience, you'd always have to look at what influencers there are. And I kind of wanted to highlight here that I think people in their head will say, well, an influencer has got to be someone who has hundreds of thousands of followers. To me, an influencer is someone who has a following that is going to be able to promote your service or is very relevant to your service or your event. If I take that last example, that was a guy who had only just started to do parkour. Him posting that video on his own social channels or providing us with content as well would get directly to people who were similar age to him, based in a similar location, and then probably had very similar interests too. So when it comes to the influencer program, for us, he was an ideal person to really promote our products and certainly get the numbers up to that parkour session in that area. And finally, one with a little bit of this influencers as well from a different kind of approach to really try and get our message out there. We actually created a competition where we asked people how you were keeping fit doing urban sports across London. This was one of our best entries that you can see up there. He was particularly very good at skateboarding, but it really just showcased the different types of sport, and it brought it to life of how you could take part too. I know we didn't have much time left and you still got a few people, Chris, so I'll pass back to you. So thanks very much and happy to answer any questions at the end of the session.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stuart. Hopefully those presentations have kind of whet your appetite. And if you're interested in doing a little bit more on social media, you can hear more now from Ollie around the Digital Marketing Hub.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks very much for the opportunity to be just talking to you about the Digital Marketing Hub. So we'll do a quick flick through a few slides so we can, when they're up and ready. So it's really exciting for us because the Digital Marketing Hub launched last week. So it's a brand new initiative and it's a free resource for anyone in sport and physical activity in England. If we go to the next slide. after 18 months of a lot of disruption and actually kind of research that started before that, we know that there's a digital marketing gap across sports and physical activity. People are really keen to engage people, engage new audiences, make sure their club, their business, their group is out there more. But there's a big gap between that and actually having the confidence, the skills, a plan, the resource to do that. So the reason why we have the Digital Marketing Hub is, again, to help anyone across sports and physical activity in England get access to support, tips, resources and training, and to close that gap. And we know that's the case, again, across volunteers, people who own their own businesses, and people who are employed in organisations across sports and physical activity. So we want to help close that gap through the Digital Marketing Hub. If we go on to the next slide. Loads of stuff is included, and depending on what areas you're looking for support and how you like to access learning and resource, we've got it for you. We have support across all areas of digital marketing, but absolutely social media is a really important one. Our research showed that is an area that is most popular, of most interest. So our playbook is an on-demand course. We have a series of live webinars that are recorded. We have opportunities to connect with your peers. Google is one of our partners, and they have teamed up with us to offer free one-to-one mentoring, and we have a range of benefits. And so we have all of that is available for social media, and all of that is available actually across the full spectrum of digital marketing. So on to the final slide. So, as I mentioned, it's freely available. I've just put the link into the chat. If you go to digital.sensible.co.uk, that's the registration page. You can go there, you can signpost it to your colleagues, to your friends, to your peers, to your workforce. Again, anyone in sports and physical activity in England, this is for you across all of that roles. The Digital Marketing Hub is provided by CIMSPA, and it has been funded by National Lottery, Sport England money. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch after this. I realise it's been super quick, but go to that link and you can find out more and you can register. Thanks, and I'll hand back to Chris.
Amazing, thanks, Ollie. I just wanted to pick up one quick question from the Q&A. We haven't got a huge amount of time, but there was a question here from Eddie, which was asking around, do we use or do you signpost to qualified professionals? And Poppy, maybe you could just ask quickly from Versus Arthritis about who you have delivering your activities.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I guess we're mainly signposting to our own content, so that's what we're kind of working with fitness professionals ourselves in terms of creating the movement sessions, and then we're also working closely with some of the healthcare professionals to create top tips videos and articles and that type of thing.
Brilliant, thanks. And Beck, same for you. You have your own qualified professionals that deliver your activities within your Facebook group.
Absolutely, yes, is the answer to the question, Chris. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to all of the speakers today. I hope that we've been able to demonstrate the potential power of social media, the ways that you can use it to reach and engage target audiences, and the way that you can potentially then support people to actually become and stay active. All of the information will still be available on online after the session, and we'll be linking online on Twitter and through LinkedIn to some of the case studies and examples. Thanks so much for joining us today. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you very much, Chris, Dr. Sherry, Poppy, Beck, Stuart, and Ollie. What a session. I knew it was going to be a really meaty session. They almost didn't have enough time, and I know there were plenty of questions coming in on that social media side. So please do keep your questions coming in. We're trying our hardest to get through them, and I'm sure they'll be answered at some point, and you have contact details. You'll be able to get in touch with London Sport if there is a burning question. We're going to go on to the next session, okay? And we're looking at community consultation and co-creation with Cormac Russell. And he's the Managing Director at Nurture Development, and Jodie Bridger from Doncaster Council. So be with us back here in 10 minutes. It's really important that we look at how we can help out those communities. So that's going to be a good session. Coming right up, grab yourself a drink.